Hi, my name is Leslie Neal, and I am the Manager of Marketing and Events here at the Mississippi State University Career Center. Today, I'm so excited to present to you my dinner etiquette workshop virtually. So I hope that you enjoy it. One thing that I love about doing these dinner etiquette workshops is that growing up, my dad was a server for years at a pretty high-end restaurant on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And so as a little girl, all the time, every evening during dinner, he ensured that my sister and I knew how to cut with a knife and a fork. Y'all, it was a lot, but I'm so thankful now because people genuinely will judge you based on how you handle yourself at the table. And so one of the things that we want to help you do at the Career Center is get comfortable with your dining etiquette so that when you're faced or in front of an employer for a potential job, the way you handle your meal will not hinder your success at that interview. So I'm going to jump right in. What I'm going to do is share my screen so that you can see my presentation. And then we're gonna go from there. So let me kind of get this set up. Give you just a second. And we're gonna switch this over. Okay, so I think we are good to go. So dinner etiquette. Again, y'all, we're gonna go through a lot of things within this workshop, but we're gonna get through it and you're gonna learn a lot of good things to kind of get you through dinner etiquette, no matter where you are, whether that's in business setting or at home. So let's just jump right in. So the first thing I want us to think about is what is etiquette, right? The word etiquette honestly has a bad rep, y'all. It does. And I think it's because over the years, it's kind of daunting. You got to do this right. You got to do that right, blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, what etiquette is appropriate behavior. And in this case, if you're thinking about dinner or dining etiquette or business dining etiquette, it means the appropriate behavior during dinner or the appropriate behavior during a business dining setting. So either way, it's displaying appropriate behavior. And no matter that there are variations of etiquette, no matter the different cultures, that varies amongst different cultures, ultimately, everybody's goal is that we actually handle eating in a pleasant way for everyone, right? Because eating together is a group effort. And so you want to make sure that you are handling it well. So we want to make sure that we are demonstrating good manners, and it starts at the dinner table. So let's start here with the table setting. Before we even talk about food, we need to talk about what is the table setting. And, it can be so fancy and people can get so creative. And so we need to be able to determine what is my stuff and what do I need to be looking for. So the first thing we're going to talk about is our table setting. So there are two types of table settings. The first one is informal, which is the traditional setup you probably have when you're at home with your significant other or home with your family. Informal is going to be a two-course meal with a beverage. And a two-course meal could mean a main dish and a dessert, and then a beverage of your choice, maybe water, tea, lemonade, whatever. And usually you're going to have it pretty simple like it is. There's a napkin, there's a fork, and there's spoon and knife. So this is an informal setting. Both of these pictures show different variations of that. Then you have the formal setting that right off the bat, you can tell this is a little fancier, right? It's more involved. There's more components. There's more just everything. It just looks fancier. In fact, there's a little centerpiece, right? So it already looks fancy. But it's a formal setting anytime there's three or more courses and beverages, okay? So when you see more of a formal setting, it's probably going to be at a wedding reception. It could be at a dinner party. Maybe your family's one of those that kind of goes all out for Christmas and for the holidays. It's one of the things that my dad used to say that my grandpa used to. I mean, they had to set out a whole spread during the holidays, and they did do the formal dining setting. And so I think that's why. Now he didn't do all that with us, but he did ensure that we knew how to cut. But so this is a formal setting. Remember, it's 3 or more courses. So in this case, you would probably have like an appetizer, an entree, and a dessert and beverages, or you may have a salad, entree, and dessert. Those would be your courses for a formal dining. Now, first quick tip that I want to tell you about. Y'all, when you look at a table setting, I mean, it can be a lot. I mean, they can get even, the one that I just showed is pretty fancy, but they can get pretty intricate. So a really good tip is to use the BD method. And what it does is it has you hold your hands up like a B and a D. And the B, which is on the left hand side, is going to be for your bread, which will be pointing to your bread and butter plate. And then D is for drinks, which would be where your drinks will be served. So you know that if you're within this area of your table, then that's your stuff, right? Now, what you need to do when you hold up a B and D is to do it discreetly in your lap so that you can kind of know, okay, this is my stuff. We don't need you going pew, at the table. Nobody needs to know what you're doing with your B and D. The only thing we need to know is that you're figuring out where your stuff is, right? So I thought that's a great tip to start. So now that we kind of know, okay, what area we are working within, right? Let's talk about utensils because the utensils on a formal table setting can be a lot. And but once you know what they are and what they're used for, it's not so overwhelming. So let's talk about that really quick. So I had these counted, 1 through 4 to kind of show you which everyone means. The first one is our salad and dinner fork, okay? And you can tell that it's the salad fork because it's smaller than the one close to the plate, which is your dinner fork. Number 2 is where we have our knife and spoons. So in this particular picture, we have what the far right spoon is our soup spoon. The middle spoon is your teaspoon, which would be used to stir your tea if you have tea to sweeten. And then your dinner knife, which is closest to the plate. Now, number 3 is the dessert spoon and fork. So, those are usually used, of course, during the dessert time, right? And what you typically do, if it is at the dessert course, you would just pull those forks down because by that point, all the other silverware would have been removed. And so then those would be the silverware that you would be left with for the evening. And then the last one, number 4, is our butter knife, and it rests on our bread and butter plate. And that, of course, is used for what you would think it's used for, and that is for butter. Now, the ones that I want you to kind of focus more on is number 1 and number 2. So the salad and dinner forks, and then the knife and spoons. And the reason being is because even if you don't have a dessert or the bread and butter knife or the butter knife, you're gonna 9 times out of 10 have a fork, a spoon, and a knife of some sort. So what I want you to be aware of is that when you're considering utensils, you want to make sure your utensils reflect the courses that you have. You only need the amount of utensils on your table that align with your courses. You don't need just extra stuff on the table just to be saying something. So by looking at that and by knowing that rule, I can tell that the smaller fork is probably a salad fork. The larger one is my dinner fork. And then if I'm thinking about my outer spoon, that's my soup spoon, then my teaspoon, and then my dinner knife. Remember, you're going to work from the outside in. And what happens is each time you use your silverware, it's going to go away with that plate when the server comes up to pick it up. Something to note about utensils is once they leave the linens, they do not return to the linens. Meaning once you use one of them, they need to go back to the plate so that when you're finished eating so that the server can take it with them. Or if you find, like, for example, your dinner knife, if you find that you ended up using your dinner knife earlier than you needed to or intended to, then after you use it, you want to make sure you place it on your bread and butter plate. That way it won't leave with your plate and you can use it for another course. Okay, so tip number 2 when thinking about your table setting is the word forks, which I think is a cool acronym basically. So if you said, okay, I'm going to set the table at home, I am ready, but then you think about, I don't know where anything goes. So the goal is to think about the word forks with the exclusion of the little r in the middle. So F is for forks, O is for round of the plate, right? Then K is for knife, and then S is for spoons. And based on this picture, that fits perfectly: the forks, plate, knife, and spoons. And that's the order to which they would be placed on the table. Great tip. So those tips are really helpful for you to remember. Another helpful tip is thinking about how many letters is in the word left and how many letters is in the word right. So in this case, there are 4 letters in the word left, L-E-F-T. There are also 4 letters in the word fork, F-O-R-K, which means your forks go on your left side. There are 5 letters in the word right, R-I-G-H-T, and there are 5 letters in the word knife, and then in the word spoon, K-N-I-F-E, S-P-O-O-N. So now you know that your knife and your spoon go to the right hand side of the plate. So those 2 things, forks and then this method, should really help you in deciding where you need to put your silverware. So now that we've talked about our utensils, we've talked about the table setting and now the utensils. Now let's talk about the plates. So our first plate here is the dinner plate. And the dinner plate can either be as shown here, which is already set at the table when you arrive, or your dinner plate can be set up in the kitchen and brought out and served to you, right? The actual meal will be served on the dinner plate. But that's number 1. Number 2 is the bread and butter plate. And y'all, the bread and butter plate is going to be your BFF during a meal. And it's because the bread and butter plate never leaves, right? It does hold your roll and your butter, but let's say, for example, you use a lemon in your beverage, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. If you use lemon and you don't want it to go inside the drink when you're done squeezing your lemon off into your beverage, then it goes on the bread and butter plate. Or let's say there is when we talk about the sugar packet, after you use your sugar packet, at some point you're going to roll that up and you're going to stick it under the bread and butter plate. So the bread and butter plate becomes a catch-all for a lot of things. And so I always like to jokingly say it becomes your BFF at dinner. So now let's talk about the beverages. So the thing to know about in a place setting is that the glasses that are on your table will represent the beverages that you'll be having. Now, in this case, when we have our dinner etiquette here on campus, we do serve our water and tea in wine glasses. So it didn't necessarily mean that we'll have wine glasses, but that we are going to have wine. But what it does represent is that we're going to have 2 beverages. In this case, based on this setting, there's going to be 3 beverages that's served. So that's the important thing about where your glasses are within the table setting. So now some common beverages that can be served in that spot on the table is going to be tea and water, which we've talked about. At our dinner etiquette, we do tea and water. And tea and water can both have lemon in it, right? Usually with the water, it's already in there to kind of give it a citrus flavor. Same with tea, but sometimes the lemon can actually be on the rim of your glass. And if you find that the lemon is on the rim of your glass, but you do want to squeeze some of it in your drink, you want to make sure that you shield when you're squeezing your lemon. You want to make sure that you're shielding it from the people across from you, because what you don't want to do is spray your neighbor with lemon juice in the eye, right? So, and once you're done not spraying, don't spray them. Once you're done with the lemon in your beverage, you can either drop the lemon in like it's shown in this picture, or you can put that lemon slice on your bread and butter plate. Now, the one that I have X'd out at the bottom and I have as a strikeout in the word is wine. As a career center, we do not suggest having alcohol when you are in a business dining setting with a recruiter, particularly if you're trying to actually land a job, right? If you're trying to get a job. And it's because y'all, we know, I like to use the term that my mother-in-law says: you'll start talking all over yourself. And I'm going to tell you, when my mother-in-law starts saying talking all over yourself, she's not saying it in a good way. So what we don't want you to do is talk all over yourself. We want you to be your best self in front of an employer or a recruiter when a job is on the line, right? And I'm going to tell you this: what you're going to do is you're going to be nervous about the interview, which means you're probably not going to eat any dinner, or you're not going to eat anything headed up to, I want to be able to eat when I get there. And sure enough, you're not going to have eaten. The alcohol is going to get in your system. You're going to start feeling it pretty quickly, and then you're not going to be your best self. You may regret that you've said something, or you didn't say something that you wanted to say, anything. So we want to make sure we're always on our at our best at our best selves whenever we're with recruiters. And so we are always going to ask you to err on the side of caution and not to have alcohol. Now, I have heard people say, but what if they insist? What happens then? Well, my suggestion then is to either suggest that, or ask for what a coworker used to say, a spritzer, which was typically like a cranberry juice and maybe like a Sprite or some type of sparkling. It could be a ginger ale mixed with it. So something that makes you feel like you're engaging in a fancier drink when really you're not. Or I just wouldn't. That's my recommendation. Now, if we need to talk more about that at a separate time, I would love to sit down and talk with you a little bit more. But in this case, that's her recommendation. Okay, so no alcohol, y'all. Okay, so now that we've talked about the table setting, we have talked about the utensils. We've kind of got up to the beverages. We know what we're going to be, what we could actually drink at a restaurant. So what else can be done before dinner? Like literally before dinner. So the first thing I want you to think about is the napkin. The napkin right there with your bread and butter plate does become your BFF as well. Now, the napkin, as soon as you sit down, locate your napkin, because they sometimes people get really creative with napkins. They may be folded nice like a flower. They may be folded like a swan. They folded all kinds of ways. But you want to find your napkin, and you're not trying to do any magic tricks. You're not flinging it out everywhere. You're just going to take it by the fold. In this case, it already looks folded. So when you open it, you want to fold it in half and place the fold in your lap. Okay. It needs to automatically go there as soon as you sit down. Now, the napkin is for, dabbing the corners of your mouth. Um, if something gets in your mouth, it's for slight coughs. Like if you know you have like a little tickle, like that's what your napkin is for, to make sure you're away from people when you kind of cough. Now, if you know, because we've all been there, y'all, where you get a tickle in your throat and you know this is not about to go away, then that's when you actually ask to excuse yourself and kind of go resolve that without at the table, because inevitably you're going to try to stifle that cough and it's just going to keep getting worse and worse. So you want to make sure that you do that. The other thing that the napkin does is it indicates if you're about to leave or if you're finished with your meal. If you are about to get up, let's say you do have to go excuse yourself and go to the restroom, you can put your napkin in the seat of your chair, or you can drape it on the back of your chair to let the server know that you were coming back, right? And then when you're finished with your meal, you can usually just kind of fold it loosely and put it to the left of your plate where your forks used to be. So your napkins are very useful. Now, what your napkin is not for is catching food that you don't want. Like it's not for something in your mouth and you spit it out your napkin. Because I'm telling you, you're gonna get to talking and just having a good old time, and you're gonna completely forget that you put this meat or whatever it is in your napkin. It's gonna fall out. So we don't recommend putting anything like that in your napkin. So those things that I have listed there is when you use it. Now, the phone. I could not help but put this on here. Because ultimately, y'all, if you're at a dinner etiquette or a dining etiquette with a business professional or like for an employer, the phone needs to go away, or it needs to be off or on silent. Now there are exceptions, and the two exceptions is if there's somebody at home that you know is about to have a baby, so you have an expecting mother, or you have a family emergency that you're kind of aware of already before you get there. And so what your responsibility is to let that host know immediately what's going on, so that they know why you have your phone out, and so that you're just saying, there's no disrespect, I'm so sorry, here's what's happening right now, and so I just kind of want to be on call in case they need me. And the host is going to be fine, but what you don't want is just to be on your phone like we are sometimes casually these days. Now, your appearance. The first thing to think about when you attend like an interview with the recruiter over dinner is that go ahead and dress business professional unless told otherwise. Go ahead and be prepared for business professional, okay? And that can be a suit and tie, and nice blouse and pants, and a blazer, so on and so forth. We have some things on our website if you want to take a look at what is business professional, but that's how you want to dress for one of these events if you're going with an employer. And so the idea is you're going to have good posture, you're going to sit up straight. What we know of normally is for elbows to be off the table while eating, but in this case, you do want your elbows off the table when you're eating. But if you're conversing, it is okay to have elbows on the table. My only thing is to be mindful of your place setting. If you put your elbows there and you're knocking over silverware, or you're nudging into somebody else's stuff, or you're bumping into somebody's whatever, it can cause a scene that you don't want. So honestly, it's easier to just keep your elbows off the table, but there is nothing wrong with putting your elbows on the table when you are not eating, because at that point you may be looking like you're engaging in the conversation. The other thing to think about is that suit jackets remain on but unbuttoned. Okay, so you can have them on, just unbutton them to kind of be able to relax a little bit better in the seat. And then the other thing that I didn't list here is about hats. And hats are okay for women if the hat goes with the attire. But for men, traditionally, the thing is that they come off immediately. Your hat comes off as soon as greet the host and have a seat. Okay, so now that we're aware of our table setting, we are aware of how we need to look, we know we need to put that phone away, and so on and so forth. Now we're ready to talk about conversation starters. And one of the things that I always want students to be aware of is that you want to be more interested versus interesting. Meaning you want to be interested in the conversation, interested in the host and what they're having to say, interested in people that are to the right and left of you, instead of the interesting character at the table who's doing all this stuff, and all they're gonna remember is, do you remember how Leslie was at the table doing blah blah blah, talking all over herself, right? So you want to make sure that you're engaging in conversation and you're being more interested versus interesting. So some other things that you can kind of think about, you want to avoid hot button topics. And y'all, I'm sure right now you could think of automatically what are some hot button topics. But we know that's going to be politics, that's going to be religion, and honestly, it's going to be health, because y'all, I don't care how positive that health story is. Somewhere down the line, there's going to be a negative Nancy or a Debbie Downer, or you might end up with health stuff. Sometimes the topic can turn gross and maybe not intended to. So health doesn't need to be brought up at the table. You do want to ask open-ended questions. So questions that will make them talk past a yes or a no, right? You want them to say some more. So we're quick to say what not to say. Here are some things you can talk about. Talk about sports, particularly in like college settings, SEC. We love talking about sports, right? Talk about the restaurant. Talk about their educational background. How did they get here? How did they end up with the company? And what are some things they love about it? Find out their educational background. Like, what school did they go to? Things like that. Allow people to talk more about themselves, and I promise you it'll go well for you at the table. Now, another thing to do, because we hear this all the time, y'all, is to research the company. And you want to research the company past the very surface level of research, right? So that may mean hitting up their social media platforms, finding out what's trending for them right now, finding out what services and products that they use that aren't just common out there, that something you got to dig a little deeper to find out. Make sure you check out their website. Look at the About Us page. Find out about their missions and values. Find out what's important to them. Particularly, find out who's the head of the place, who's the CEO, who's the director, or however that works. Find out as much as you can about the company, so that when you're at the table, you're able to converse more about them while they're there. It'll be a hit. And then you also want to hold off on business talk until after the dinner. Even if it's after the dinner, you don't bring up business talk. The host will. The recruiter who invited you to dinner will be the one that brings up the business talk. So if they never bring it up, it's just been a great dinner together, meeting new people. But don't you bring it up, okay? Now, that was before dinner. We're kind of prepping and getting ourselves ready. Now, during dinner, what's going on during dinner? Okay. So the first thing I want you to think about is passing items. You're going to do a lot of passing of items at the table. The catch to passing items is you always want to pass to the right. Another thing about passing items, if it's things like the gravy dish or a salad dressing dish, you want to make sure that you place that item on the table to the right, so that the person is able to grab it without any type of spills happening. So some things that you may end up passing, some common items, are like your dinner rolls, And if you're the person right in front of that dinner roll, if you're the person right in front of that salad dressing dish or that gravy dish, you're responsible for starting that pass. You're responsible for saying, "Hi, does anyone want to go ahead and have some bread or a roll or whatever?" You start it and you go to the right. That means if you're the closest and you're starting it, you don't get it until it's all over, okay? Until it makes its way around the table. Um, and so the same, like I said, with dressings. Now, the thing is, if a dressing doesn't, sometimes salad dressings come on a salad, but sometimes they don't. They come in dishes, as shown in this picture. If they do come in a dish like that, then when you get to it, y'all, you can only drizzle on there. Now, don't get me wrong. I love a little bit of salad with my ranch dressing, but I know when I'm out with a group of people, particularly strangers, I can't do that. That's not proper etiquette. So I have to take a little drizzle and probably eat my salad a little drier than I typically do. But the good thing about that is, one thing you have to remember about business dining settings is it's not about the food. It's going to be about that conversation. It's going to be about trying to get that job. It's not about the food. And when you start kind of thinking about some of your old ways that you do when you're at home, that's when you know, okay, I'm not thinking about the food anymore. Or I'm not thinking about the conversation. I'm too focused on the food. The other thing on this particular slide is the salt and pepper shaker. What you need to know about salt and pepper is that they are married. They always pass together. Never pass one without the other, because inevitably, y'all, somebody's gonna get a little salt. What's that? What's that? A little pepper. It's gonna come up. So they're an item, and they are always passed together to the right. Some other common items is, I was mentioning, the gravy dish. One of the things that I want you to notice is, like, on this particular gravy dish, there is a handle. You want to make sure when you're passing that item to the person that the handle is facing them, so that they have a smooth transition from getting that handle and pouring it on their entree. Then sugar packets. Sugar packets get passed too. And remember, if you're the closest one, you are responsible for grabbing that sugar packet and passing it on. Now, here's the thing, we didn't talk about this with beverages, but we did talk about tea. And I know in the South we love our sweet, sweet tea. I know my husband does, in particular. Well, in this case, you could only use 2 packs of sugar. Something to think about, and throughout this entire meal, is moderation and to not appear excessive, right? So 2 packs of sugar, I don't care if you usually have 10 of them, you got to have 2. And once you finish with your sugar and you stir that tea up quietly, not dinging everything around, then you fold your sugar packet up and you slide it under your bread and butter plate, remember? So I just want to make sure we know 2 packets of sugar, that's what you can get. And then another thing that's probably is pretty common about passing is your appetizers. Here lately, there's a lot of, like, where a person will get a couple different samples of different appetizers, and everybody kind of just can share from each of those. I'm not sure how much that happens since COVID, but if that's the case, then you pass it to the right so that everybody can serve themselves. And if it comes with some type of sauce, remember to drizzle. Okay. Now, the other question is what to order. I mean, now sometimes in these, like when we have our dinner etiquette workshops here on campus, the meal is already set. Students are notified about the meal about a week out, so they know what's going to be on the menu. Um, in this type of setting, you might not know. You might get there and it's already planned for you, or you might get there and have to order. So the first rule of thumb is to follow the lead of the host. A lot of times the host might say, "Oh my goodness, you have got to try the steak here." And so then okay, I can eat steak, because they're then kind of telling you what the price ranges they're working through. If they don't do that, then you need to be mindful of ordering mid-priced meals. Now, here's a rule of thumb, just in case you're like, well, I don't know, maybe there's not any prices on the menu or something. If it's pork, chicken, pasta, or rice, those are going to be some very reasonably priced meals. A lot more reasonably priced than like beef, lamb, shellfish, and what's the other one? Did I say lamb, beef, and fish? Those meals are going to be a little higher. Okay, so you want to make sure you think about beef, pork. No. Pork, chicken, pasta, and rice. Those are the ones that we know are pretty affordable. What you don't want to do is order like the kiddie menu. No chicken strips on the kiddie menu, right? We need to have a mid range. Just that's just the proper etiquette. Now, it is appropriate to ask the server if, let's say, you want to know, how I'm sorry, what do you recommend? What's your favorite dish here? It's perfectly fine that they give their opinion. And then you can kind of gauge from there. It's also a great opportunity for conversation at the table. You can ask the host, hey, what do you recommend? And then they can kind of give you some ideas. A couple things that we haven't mentioned to this point is that you only eat once everyone at your table has been served. Now, let's say maybe somebody's meal is taking a little bit longer, because servers are usually good about coming out and letting you know, I'm so sorry, this is taking a little bit longer, we're waiting on blah blah blah. If that is the case, then the host 9 times out of 10 will say, y'all go ahead and start eating, we're fine, you go ahead, and they'll probably just keep talking and making sure everybody's feeling good. In that case, then yes, feel free to eat before everybody has been given their meal. If not, you want to wait till everybody has eaten. The proper etiquette is to wait till everybody eats before you start. And then, no matter how good it was, or no matter how much you didn't eat because you were nervous about eating too much, no to go boxes. Okay, it's just don't do it, because it feels like me. If I could just get home, I could just eat this the way that I want to, which again goes back to then I'm more focused on the food and I'm not focused on engaging with conversation. So no to go boxes. Okay, so cutting food. Now, I put this picture up because I thought it was the perfect representation of a bite-sized piece. You need to cut food in bite-sized pieces that will ensure that when you take the fork to your mouth, there's not all this type of stuff all around your mouth. You're not making a big mess. And what you aren't supposed to do, though, is you can't cut like this piece of salmon. You can't cut up the whole piece of salmon ahead of time and then start eating. You have to cut a piece at a time in order to, for proper etiquette of eating your entree or anything that's large scale. You need to cut it up to in one piece at a time, and that's what you eat. Now, cutting food is narrowed down to two basic styles. There is the American style and then the continental style. Now, in these pictures, what I like about these, and which I was glad I was able to find both of them and looks at this way, is because of the way they're holding the knife and the fork. You see how the pointer fingers are resting on the stems of both, and the way the fork is piercing the meat, and then they're cutting. That's how you properly hold your knife and how you properly cut. What I really like about that top picture is that even though to some people that piece of pork or roast beef, whatever that may be, it may look like something you can kind of just eat, that's a perfect bite size. It's fairly large. And so what I like is that she's even cutting it down into a smaller size, which to me reflects more of the size of that salmon. Now, just before we get into, just know American versus continental styles ultimately boils down to what you end up doing with the fork, okay? So let's talk about American style. When I show you American and continental, you're going to notice that the top picture on these slides is going to be the same. And I kept that picture the same because I wanted to let you know that the cutting of the meat or the item doesn't change. That part doesn't change. What changes is what hand the fork ends up in. In American style is also known as the zigzag method because you hold the fork in one hand, you cut, and then you put your knife down and you take the fork and you change it over to the other hand, which represents the zigzag. So that's why I like the picture at the bottom, because it's showing you that at some point he must have cut, although of course there's no knife in his picture. At some point he must have cut, and then now he's eating the meal with his right hand. So that's the difference in American style. The fork switches to the other hand. Now, in American style, when you want to show yourself in a resting position, like let's say you may just be talking, or maybe you're about to get up and go to the restroom real quick, but you weren't finished. The number one is showing you how you're supposed to leave your knife and fork in the resting position. The knife should be across the top edge, and then the fork kind of in the center with the tongs facing up. Number two is shown in a finished position where the knife and the fork are together at pretty much the 10 and 4 if you were thinking about a clock, and the tongs are facing up on the fork. Now, continental style, remember, the cutting stays the same. So the top picture is showing how you cut. The bottom picture is showing you what's happening with the fork. Again, the fork doesn't switch hands. She must have cut this piece of whatever she's eating. I think it was pizza actually. And then after she cut it, she went straight to her mouth with the fork. So there was no switching of hands. And what you'll find is you probably do a combination of both of these anytime that you're eating dinner. I know I do. It just depends on what I'm eating and how I'm eating it. But in this case, this is how you do continental style. There's no switching of hands. And so for continental style, when you're trying to show your resting position, the knife is, you kind of make this V shape with the knife and the fork. And in this time, the tongs are facing down on the fork. And even though in two for the finished position, they're in the same like clock position, which is 10 and 4, the difference is the tongs of the fork are facing down. Now, eating food, something that I did not mention when we were talking about passing our bread and our rolls earlier, is that in order to eat bread, the proper etiquette is to pinch pieces of bread at a time. So, although I know that she's not eating a piece of roll, what I like about this is that she has pinched off a piece of this toast and she's buttering that piece. And then, after you butter each piece, that's what you eat. You eat that piece of bread. You don't break all your pieces up and butter it, and you don't slather the butter all over, because y'all, I know a hot roll with some butter on it, it's all melted and ooey. It's so good, right? But proper etiquette says we have to pinch it off, put the butter on, and eat that piece. Sorry. Okay, so when things go wrong, and they will, that's just kind of how things work. You want to be discreet. So if there is a spill at the table, or maybe something happened, just keep your composure. Try to see if you can get your server over, and remember to be very polite with your servers, because how you handle a server could say a lot about you. So make sure that you're respectful and polite. Plus, if you're with the recruiter, remember you're being interviewed the whole time, and so the way that you handle a server will say a lot as well. So make sure that you motion them over. You're not snapping your fingers at them. You're not hey 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 hey. At some point, they will come back over, and at some point, you'll be able to kind of quietly get to them. And that's when you motion them over to let them know that something has happened so that they can assist you. If for some reason silverware falls on the floor, you leave it on the floor. No need to try to get out under the table trying to pick it up. That's not going to go as expected. You want to go ahead and again let the server know so they can get you some more silverware. And then the part that's always funny at these events is when I say this last line. Inedibles go out the way they went in. So what does that mean, Leslie? It means, let's say you are eating an olive, and olives usually have like a hard pit in them. Maybe you didn't expect it to be in there, but it is. And you realize right away that you have this hard piece of pit in your mouth. So, based on this etiquette, what it's saying is that pit needs to go back on the fork. If you ate that olive with the fork, it needs to go back on the fork. And then in this case, I would either put it on the if you're done with your plate, you can put it there so that it can go with the server, or you need to put it off to your bread and butter plate so that it's out of the way. But that's how it's supposed to go based on this. Now, they did say for fish, if you end up with like a fish bone, that you're going to take out with your pointer finger and your thumb. And then you can put that again either on the plate if it's about to go, or on your bread and butter plate. Otherwise, that's what they recommend. Now, Leslieology says to be, make a judgment call there. If you know for a fact that you're going to make more of a mess trying to put it back on that fork than you would if you just excuse yourself from the table and took care of it, then by all means do that. Do not put it in your napkin though, because remember, you're going to forget about it and you're just going to fall out when you don't want it to and all that. But sometimes you have to excuse yourself, and that's perfectly fine. Just remember, everything about something going wrong is about being discreet and not causing a scene, because you could get brownie points on how well you handle the situation. So, y'all, that's it. That is our dinner etiquette one-on-one. All the information that I usually would do in one of our face-to-face interactions for dinner etiquette has just been put into this presentation. But if you have any questions or specific questions for me, you can always visit our website, or you can come drop in at, we're located in 300 Montgomery Hall, or you can give us a call at 662-325-3344. We would love to sit down and chat with you about any of your questions. The last slide is just showing you all my sources for some of those great pictures that I posted throughout the presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then we're back. So y'all, I hope this was everything that you were needing it to be. I hope that it covered a lot of the basic information that you needed for dinner etiquette. But if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. That's why we're here, and we can help you navigate this whole idea of this dining etiquette, with an employer. So hope you all have a great day. Thanks.